5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the PPR Stock Report. You are Trent Seibel and Joe Marshall. That is PPR Stat Grinder and Daxo Dreamy.
Daxo Dreamy, that is the final answer, huh?
Yeah, I think we're going with Dak_so_dreamy. That was the bet that we had 3 weeks or so back about the Ezekiel Elliott, how far he's going to fall. We spent a couple, 2 weeks trying to figure out a name. And with the new news with the Romo stuff, we're going with Daxo Dreamy.
Yeah, I guess all your stat grinding, you're not very creative. You're maybe more analytical. Daxo Dreamy. Do you know what? That's a fine name. Dak is dreamy. If you're a friend of the podcast, I'm obviously Joe Marshall, also known as at PPR Jesus. But until the season gets kicked off, I will be at Daxo Dreamy, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it. Dak's all right, but he ain't no Tom Brady. That's for sure.
He's not Tom Brady, but...
So we got a lot of news for you. Week 3 is in the books. We're going to be starting Week 4 tonight. It is the 1st of September, which means we only have...
7 days left, baby.
Oh, yeah. 7 days till football.
I can't wait. You know what? Let me rewind real quick. You mentioned Week 3's in the books. Great. That was a week I was looking forward to. Now, did you happen to think that some of the starters... It seems like they're playing less and less, which is probably a good thing, especially with injury and concussion concerns. It just, Week 3 used to be a little bit more. We used to see majority of starters would go a half or 3/4, and we're not seeing that nearly as much. So it left a little bit to be desired. It wet the palate just enough for a regular football, but I wanted to see just a little bit more.
I don't know. I got mixed emotions on it. Like you said, there wasn't as much actual good football happening, but at the same time, there was enough to see a whole lot of guys go down. And that's what we don't want to see out of preseason.
And we're recording Thursday. Now, every preseason game, every fourth preseason game will be played tonight, minus the Redskins-Buck game, which actually they played last night because of weather concerns. And this is, in a way, it's almost the worst day in sports for me. The fourth game in preseason usually has no meaning whatsoever.
Well, it's supposedly a little flip-flop from what you were just saying. Normally you see no starters, but there are a few games where we're supposed to be seeing starters. For example, Tom Brady is supposed to be starting for the Patriots.
And yeah, Tom Brady is allegedly starting this game, and it's apparently because he hasn't had enough preseason reps.
Same with
Drew Brees.
Drew Brees.
Yeah, the whole Saints offense apparently is supposed to see about a quarter.
Which is odd, but apparently they just don't like.
As a guy who has shares in Drew Brees, I hate that. Actually, I have shares in Tom Brady also. Get those guys out of there.
Yeah, they don't need to be playing, but...
on the Brady news, another thing that's kind of odd with that is, Garoppolo is sitting. Garoppolo's not expected. I thought, get him a few more reps in, but... I think they're comfortable in what they've seen, I guess.
I think it's along the lines of what you were saying. The coaches are starting to wisen up a little bit to these guys going out there getting hurt. In this situation, Brady's not playing at the beginning of the season, so they're basically going to be stuck with the Garoppolo as their starter. And if he goes down, then what are they left with?
Me.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So, I don't know. It's, to me, probably a good move not to stick Garoppolo out there. Then you got the water boy throwing to you, but...
Now, that's how Tom Brady came along.
Yeah, so what else do we have in the news? We've got news about Charles.
Yeah, Jamal Charles. News has kind of been trickling out over the last week or so from people familiar with the situation in Kansas City that Jamal Charles, a little slow coming back from the second ACL repair, and I guess the way it's been worded is that he hasn't basically earned his role like what we're used to seeing him as, let's call him a bell cow back, and it might even be the case where we might see him out on week 1. So let's hope you drafted Spencer Ware if you drafted Jamal Charles, because Spencer Ware is looks like he may start regardless if Charles plays or not, and there might be a running back by committee type of situation.
Well, so Charles is out. We've got injuries up and down as far as stuff that's new and old, but new injuries as of week 3. You got Julio, who is out with his ankle being injured. AJ Green went down. We were talking about it last Thursday. Someone was going down, and we talked about repeatedly that it was going to be a running back. Don't get running backs, but it just seems to be all these wide receivers and quarterbacks that are dying.
Yeah, the quarterbacks, and we'll get into it, but the Teddy Bridgewater injury was just horrific. Yeah, what are you bringing up? Julio getting hurt? Are you trying to raise my anxiety? Do you have a Zoloft or something I could take?
Well, you just talked about Brady. You got shares in him. You talked about Breeze playing, and now you got shares in him. I know you got shares of Julio, so let's just get it all out of the way.
Oh, my gosh. My heart stopped when he went on this. He went down for a long pass. It was about a 40-yard play. He was interfered with. It looks like he was going to come down with a catch if it weren't for the interference, which was called. And then he went hobbling over to the sideline, and I went swearing up and down my house.
So you're a big fan of Julio, but at what point does this almost become kind of normal for him? You said it earlier that Julio is just as good as Antonio Brown. You said on an earlier podcast. The major difference,
talent-wise,
though,
I think so.
The major difference, Antonio Brown doesn't see these little nagging injuries every single year like Julio does.
No, you're right. That's 100% correct, and it's the reason Antonio Brown is overwhelmingly picked above him, which he should be. If you were going to go ahead and tell me you're going to pick Odell over Julio, which is happening in quite a few leagues now, I couldn't fault you for that, although I still prefer Julio. But, at the end of the day, Odell has probably a better offense and a better quarterback. And, although he's seen some hamstring injuries himself, it seems like it's a little bit less frequent than Julio. But Julio's been in the league longer, so we've just had more exposure to it.
So I dropped to the ground when I saw A.J. Green go hobbling off, because A.J. Green is the guy that I have in the APQ league. Is my primary guy. I traded for him.
I was watching that game live, Trent, and it was the same thing. I'm not invested in A.J. Green, but it looked like at first what I was afraid of. It looked like a non-contact type of situation.
Which are generally the worst for these wide
They
receivers.
really are. But then looking at the replay, I even slowed it down. He kind of banged knees with the guy, the defender, and he went hobbling off. It was very precautionary. They both are fine, but again,
as far as we know, that's what the NFL says.
That's what each respective team says.
And if you have been on the news whatsoever on football, you know that Romo went down. And they said Romo was fine also. He was standing on the sidelines, just like the other two.
The Kardashian cowboy said that he was fine?
Yes, and then the next day, he's out for 6 to 10 weeks with a broken back.
I think we can rest assured that they both are fine. They got nicked up. I don't want to make mountains out of molehills with all of these guys, but we can all breathe a sigh of breath of relief.
Hey, I'm not breathing any kind of sigh of relief talking about this Teddy Bridgewater stuff.
I mean, I'm on beer one, and I really just butchered that.
That's all right. Let's just move on to Teddy Bridgewater.
All right, thanks.
Teddy B.
Thanks for the pass.
All right, so Teddy B, this was catastrophic. The news coming out from Teddy Bridgewater, they were talking about his knee injury being at a point where he could lose his leg, his career. Luckily, it doesn't look like that's the case. He had a non-contact injury. Torn ACL, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year, which really puts them in a bad spot.
So it was a torn ACL and a dislocated kneecap, I believe.
Yes.
And it sounds like he was just going back for a pass, going back for the drop. He planted, knee tore, he went down. Now, can you maybe kind of explain that to our listeners? What happened? How did it get so bad? We've seen hundreds of torn ACLs among all of the sports. This seemed different. The ambulance was called on the field. I think they actually sedated him.
Yeah, from what I read, they tried to reduce the dislocation on his knee. And generally, if you're trying to move an ortho injury like that, reducing the amount of dislocation and whatnot, a lot of times that means that you don't have a pulse there anymore, which means whatever happened was causing blood flow to stop, and that's when you lose your leg. That's a dire emergency. They said that basically when they tried to fix it, it failed, which I don't know that means for sure that he didn't get his pulse back, but that is a good chance that that's what happened. So they got him to the hospital quick enough, got him fixed. There was supposedly no vascular damage, but with a knee injury like that, if there's blood flow cut off, that could possibly cause muscle damage that will never, ever get better. And like I said, he could have lost his leg if he was losing that blood flow. So,
we're still hearing information trickling out that this potentially could be career-ending. So we can just wish him, a happy in healthy return. Now let's stay on this for a second though, because there of course are other fantasy
Ripple
implications.
effects.
Of course, and again, hopefully Teddy gets better. But in terms of what we do, talk about PPR fantasy leagues. What are the repercussions here? If you are a guy taking Peterson's been going overwhelmingly right around the turn or so. Let's say between 9 and 12. Is this a positive for him, a negative? Are you trying to move from him?
Yeah, the first thing that I saw repeatedly was Bridgewater's down. They're going to be running that offense through Peterson, which is probably the case, but I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing because you got to remember, Peterson's still 31. He's not 28, 27-year-old Peterson that can run through a whole team, and he's going to have to now because those defenses are going to stack the box.
Well, and he had a heavy dosage of carries last year, of course, and we all saw him over the last 8 weeks really slow down. So, yeah, this is a changing situation. Let me play the this or that game with Adrian Peterson here. Let me fire this off.
You love that this or that
Yeah,
game.
let's go. Right now, LaShawn McCoy, Adrian Peterson.
I think LaShawn McCoy at this point has a better year. So I think Adrian Peterson probably still has better name value.
So if you have Adrian Peterson, you'd give him up for LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, I would definitely entertain that. So
Doug Martin, Adrian Peterson.
I think Doug Martin is probably the back end of what I would look at for Adrian Peterson. I honestly think at this point Adrian Peterson is not going to do well, so I think Doug Martin does better.
We all know that you like looking at all their back ends.
Yes.
Last guy here, Mark Ingram, Adrian Peterson.
I think I would stick with Adrian Peterson on that one.
So Doug Martin is truly the Mendoza line.
Yes. I don't believe in Ingram as much as you do this year. You're a big Ingram fan. You had him last year. He did good for you. And he's a guy that I could be really wrong on. But.
I have been high on Ingram. I actually ended up with 0 shares of him. He was being overdrafted a little bit. I still like him. But, a little note on him, I'm going to just go rogue here, is oddly enough, C.J. Spiller has been seeing a lot of time with the starting offense. They actually rotated 50-50 with the starters last week. So I guess if the starters are out there tonight, that might be one little thing to watch on week 4 of crappy preseason. Another thing here on the Vikings, I'm going to circle the wagons back to the Vikings real quick, is Stephon Diggs is a guy, and he's not owned in 100% of leagues. He's probably about 70% ownership or so. A lot of people, myself included, have had high hopes for him being almost in a mini little, we all hope, Antonio Brown role, something like that. He showed pretty well as a rookie last year, and he's played very well in the preseason. What do you think that does to him? Sean Hill, if you look at his numbers side by side with Teddy Bridgewater for his career, they're almost identical. I mean, you're getting a similar player. Teddy didn't really throw the ball downfield too much. I mean, if you have Diggs, say, in a wide receiver 3 or flex role, do you still feel confident rolling him out there?
I think that it's not going to be a whole lot different than what we had last year as far as the Vikings, how they're going to run that offense. They're really talking about airing it out now. You've seen Teddy Bridgewater in the shotgun a lot, but now that they're switching back to Sean Hill, I think they're going to have him be more of a game manager, which is similar to what we saw last year out of Bridgewater. And Diggs did perfectly fine last year. So I think we're going to see a similar situation this year from what we got last year, which is good. So, yes, I feel good with him in that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 area. The Adrian Peterson thing, I think, is just going to have more of an effect on him because now they don't even have to worry about, the Teddy Bridgewater deep ball possibility.
And before you go running for the hills on Diggs, consider this also. The Vikings, they were a winning team last year in the playoffs. Maybe with their starting quarterback out, they're not winning in as many games, and they have to throw for necessity, game flow. They're coming from behind potentially in the fourth quarter. They like to keep the game close. They like to play great defense and run the ball. And, maybe the game flow changes in Diggs' advantage. And then also another thing to consider is whenever you see a backup quarterback or a young quarterback come in, they're not great at reading all their progressions. So they're not as apt to maybe check off to the second or third or even fourth option in a route. So I don't really think this bumps Diggs down at all. To me, yes, Peterson, a couple backs I'd be a little bit afraid of now. But Diggs, I like him about the same as I did before.
So let's stick to the whole quarterback theme right now. What do you think about this whole Colin Kaepernick deal? It's not necessarily fantasy relevant, but it's still football news.
Yeah, we didn't lead with this purposely because I don't want it to be too much news. I'm not one to interrupt somebody's, First Amendment right of speech. So, go do what you want to do, Kaepernick. I will say this. I think the timing of this was all a little fishy. I think his, career is kind of in flux right now. I think he was really feeling the heat. I don't think he's playing very well. First of all, he looks terrible. He looks almost sick. If you saw Colin Kaepernick, when he was, marching on the field in the Super Bowl a few years ago against the Ravens, I mean, he was jacked up, man. He was ripped. He was looking like he can lift through the gym. And it looks like somebody put a pin in his arm. I mean, he looks tiny. What has he been doing? I know he was rehabbing some injuries, but I don't know.
I just saw a picture of him just yesterday, the day before I was telling you about, and you're right. I mean, you could see every single muscle in his body, and they were like sticking out with veins and stuff. Like, that's all he did was work out.
Oh, I know the picture. And he was standing next to Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah, it was on the magazine cover. That was the one where Russell Wilson wasn't wearing a cup, and they didn't blur it out because his whole
his muscle was sticking out also.
It was sticking out halfway down his leg.
Well, maybe we'll have to post this picture online.
Yeah.
So wait, you have a poster of it in your bedroom, right?
Yeah, we can just take a picture right there. This Kaepernick thing, though, it's not going away because I don't think he wants it to go away, obviously, because of what he's trying to do, but he's just kind of making it worse and worse. First, it was just not standing up, and now he's wearing the pig socks.
Yeah, I think that was a dated picture. I think that was a dated photo. We will clarify on that.
I mean, yeah, we still got to look into it. There's a lot of news.
It still just shows he's kind of a punk,
Yeah, I mean, like you said, his career kind of looks like it's going down the toilet. So now, let's say you're Colin Kaepernick and you know you're about to get cut. Now you can tell other teams that, hey, they cut me because of this, not because I'm bad at football. Is that going to work? I don't know. I think all the coaches pretty much know right now he's bad at football.
I would think he would get another chance if the 49ers were to cut him. And you know what? There's some monetary repercussions for San Francisco if they cut him in terms of his contract. So in my gun to the head, I say he's a 49er when the season starts. I was going to talk about one thing here, and it may be worth 30 seconds of our time or so. Matt Ryan, he's been a fantasy quarterback that has really underwhelmed the last few years. 5 years ago or so, Matt Ryan really was coming onto the scene as a guy, with heavy ownership in many of these leagues. You could be comfortable starting him if you waited a few rounds on a quarterback. And that hasn't really been the case the last few years. So it looks like he, got serious in the offseason.
Working with a straight coach, right?
Yes, and specifically for the deep ball. If you look at some of the advanced metrics, advanced metrics on some of these stats as far as efficiency rating on passes, longer than 20 yards. So, I mean, he's at the very bottom of these lists. And I guess I didn't really...
Was he worse than Peyton Manning last year?
That I don't know off the top of my head. It's hard to imagine because I don't know that Peyton could throw past 20 yards. So he might not have qualified.
Okay, so you probably have to throw more than so many past 20.
Yeah, to qualify for the list. And I'm not sure that he did that. So I don't know. I didn't really realize that those stats were that bad on his deep efficiency. That could be an adult film name, Deep Efficiency.
Deep Efficiency.
But
right, so
because Julio kind of masks that. I mean, you launch it up to Julio.
And he catches it and runs for 50 yards after the catch or something.
I don't know if this has fantasy implications, but it has to be a shining light for him.
To me, Matt Ryan is an elite quarterback when he is throwing the ball, not under pressure. I think a lot of what you see out of Matt Ryan not being good is when he has pressure. Now, the only thing that I could see that might help him as far as that goes, if he can throw deeper, maybe the defense has to stay back a little bit more. And
stay a little bit truer, stay a little honest.
Yeah, and then they're not in his face so much. But on the surface, I don't know that throwing the ball deeper is going to help Matt Ryan be a quarterback because he makes bad decisions and he's just not good when he's under pressure. And he's under pressure quite a bit. Thomas Rawls, another guy worth talking about right now. Haven't seen a whole lot of him in preseason, but he's supposedly working with the ones a lot in practice. And all we keep hearing about is the legend of Christine Michael.
Kristen Michael.
Christine is how it's spelled, so that's how I'm going to say it.
Okay.
So, yeah, the legend of Christine Michael. What do you think? You think we're going to see a heavy dose of Christine or Kristen Michael when the season starts, or is Rawls basically just going to step right back into the role that he had at the end of last year up until his injury?
So I saw this news come out also, and actually, we don't get to go to these camps and watch all the practices. I sure would love to. So if somebody wants to bankroll or GoFundMe where we could start seeing some training camps,
we'll give you guys double
yeah,
videos.
that'd be great. Maybe we'll set something up on the pod next year for this. I kind of was under the impression that Rawls was still injured and not really practicing, but then reading this, it was actually, a Seattle Times writer for the Seahawks, Bob Condata, and he said that, Christine Michael's role more or less has kind of been over-exaggerated, that, it looks like it might be more of like a glorified preseason role, and that Thomas Rawls has overwhelmingly been, the lead dog in this backfield.
I think Christine Michael, we'll go either way. I think his skill set has been widely over-exaggerated from the looks of it over the last couple of years. But, Amir Abdullah, another guy that kind of reminds me of the Christine Michael mold. There was a lot of really big expectations for him last year. You remember how big that hype train got rolling into the season?
So he might have been the player that benefited most from the preseason. I mean, if you would have drafted last year in, say, July, and then drafted at the end of August after Amir, he tore up preseason. He looked really good, and he kind of underwhelmed, I guess, in his rookie year. 597 yards rushing. He had over a 4-yard average, 4.2, 2 touchdowns, chipped in with 25 catches. That's kind of the thing. Theo Riddick had 80. So if he could maybe get some of that target share.
I just feel like we're going back in time, man. This was the same stuff that was said about him. I remember the first game he played, he did some zigging and zagging and just made people look stupid on the field. Some long touchdowns. And all of a sudden, they were saying he's the next Barry Sanders. Do you remember that?
I do. You were saying he's the next Barry Sanders. You were in love with Amir.
No. I traded him a week later.
You were in love with Amir.
I had Amir, and I traded him. I was talking him up because I knew that hype wasn't going to be sustained.
You were beating the Amir Abdullah drum, which is fine. Actually, that's fine. And if we go back to last year, he has a big fumbling problem also, and he fumbled a ton in college. He fumbled early in the season last year. I actually think he's being underdrafted this year, Trent.
Well, they're talking about him being the bell cow this year, so if he can do that, he can hold on to the ball, and he can run the way he's supposed to run, then he's going to be worth well more than where people are getting him in the draft.
Do you know, he's actually a guy specifically post-draft that I'm trying to make some moves for. If I can give up, a middle-round receiver for him, or, if I was to grab, somebody's handcuff potentially, like, maybe D'Angelo Williams or someone like that, Spencer Ware, I would take a flyer on a guy like Amir Abdullah. If we saw him at 600 yards rushing, if we could get him, I'm going to throw a prediction. I'm going to ask for yours as well. I think Amir this year runs for 800 yards, chips in 5 touchdowns, but I want to see those receptions up. So I think we'll see him at about 45 catches from 25, and then maybe somewhere closer to 350 yards. So, I mean, with that production in a PPR league, that's definitely worth a flex play or, a bye-week flyer. What do you think? Where do you have him this year?
I've got him right around 600, 650 on the year. I really don't see his catches going up a ton, but if he does his catches, let's say he gets up to the 40 catches, then I think I agree with you. He's going to be worth a middle of the round, draft pick, but I just don't know that he's going to be able to stay healthy for a whole year and hold the football for a whole year.
Coming off a shoulder injury, too, and I know you don't like those shoulder injuries.
Shoulder injuries are tough, especially for a running back to have to put their shoulder down. So, another running back.
Wait, hold on.
All right.
I'm not done with Amir Abdullah.
You just keep on rolling.
I want an Amir Abdullah bet.
All right.
Let's give me a running back. Pick a running back against my Amir Abdullah. Bet here on the pod. PPR Stock Report bet.
Who's going to be better?
Yeah.
All right.
How about this?
I'm gonna go deep, and I'm gonna basically give you a handicap here. I'll say Rashad Jennings has a better year than Amir Abdullah.
No, I agree. I actually think Rashad Jennings does have a better year than Amir Abdullah.
I thought I was gonna get you on that one.
What about, who do you have? Duke Johnson or Amir Abdullah?
I think Duke's gonna have a good year.
Give me Amir Abdullah. Can we shake on that?
Yeah.
$1 bet?
$1.
Okay, wonderful.
I said I was going to get you on Rashad Jennings.
Now you can move. Yeah, you try to downplay. Oh, well, this bum on a bad team in a bad
Jennings
situation.
Is getting picked he's being picked after Amir Abdullah.
Yeah, it's close.
All the time.
I think he is, but I actually, too, like Rashad Jennings this year.
I think he's going to do good things.
I will allow you to go on to the next running back.
Allowed. All right. Let's talk about Lilos.
Lilos.
From last year.
No, formerly known as Lilos. We're talking Carlos Williams.
Yeah, Carlos
Lilos
Williams.
weighed in at 261 pounds. I mean, that is a lot of whoppers.
Well, but that's how it always works. It's the guys that have little in their name or Lil are always these big old mofos.
Yeah, tiny.
Tiny. He's 8 feet tall, bald guy, or whatever. So that's Lilos. He's still Lilos.
And he was released from the Bills recently.
He was released. He working out for the Steelers. So here's what's odd about that. He's still suspended.
Yes.
So I don't really see the value in the Steelers taking him. I mean, you would think that they would try to get another running back that might be able to fill in during Le'Veon Bell, which they already have anyways, and D'Angelo. Unless they're worried that D'Angelo wasn't going to hold up for 4 games. He's old.
Hey, these teams, they keep everything close to the vest nowadays.
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't know, but
here's
suspended
the thing,
player doesn't help a suspended player.
If there was, exactly. If there was an underlying problem going on with D'Angelo, why would they be looking at a bozo that's out during the time you would need him?
And it almost seems like the Steelers shouldn't even be looking at him.
No.
He's out because he's breaking laws.
Yeah, this is a bad PR move for the Steelers.
Are they the new Cowboys?
You know, with what they have going on with Le'Veon constantly, Martavis constantly, I didn't understand this one either. I guess it's a due diligence thing. Hey, this guy really showed some talent last year. Let's pick him up and maybe see what we have. But apparently there's 5 teams interested. We've seen 2 workouts, one with the Jets. Jets let him walk with no offer. And then now the Steelers. I don't think either of them are fits. Do you know where I don't want to see him end up is Chicago, which I could see. And I have shares of Jeremy Langford, and I don't want him eating into that. He could keep eating all the whoppers he wants to. Just stay away from Jeremy Langford.
Well, you've got double shares over there.
Because I have Alshon?
Well, you got the rookie over there as well also.
No, I don't have him. Jordan Howard?
Jordan Howard. No, you were talking about getting Howard in the rookie draft, but you went another route.
Tyler Boyd.
You got that Tyler Boyd.
Pull it together, Seibel.
Dude, that was like 3 weeks ago. You talked about it for like 2 weeks straight. All right, so, yeah, I could see him ending up somewhere like the Bears, but what I really want to see is him end up nowhere. These guys that are breaking laws and get suspended kind of just need to not be playing football anymore. Especially when you see, these other bozos that do other things, and then next thing you know, they're all over the place on teams. I mean, you got Adrian Peterson.
Relax, Adolph, okay?
Hey.
Give the guy a chance. This is a first-time offense type of deal.
All right, we'll give him a chance. Next year, when he's on a second offense, then we'll talk again. So, John Brown cleared his concussion protocol. Not a lot to say there. He's not going to be playing this week, but it looks like he will be playing in week 1. So, you got to like that if you're a John Brown owner.
So, a little bit of more underlying news there is, the day before he was cleared, which I believe was Tuesday, so Monday, news came out that he was still having headaches and having some, underlying problems along with the concussions. And then all of a sudden, he's cleared. So
maybe his wife's just talking into his ear all the time.
I don't know. I think teams are still playing loose with the concussions, and it's a risky business.
Yeah, that's a bad move. I mean, didn't they push the concussion lawsuit? It's going to the Supreme Court now. I mean, it's a big deal. So these courts, if they're messing around with this concussion protocol, they're looking to get sued.
So, same thing kind of going on, piggybacking off the John Brown concussion, is Ladarius Green. Now, he actually was put on the PUP list, the in-season PUP list, so he'll be out for 6 weeks. And they're not really saying, again, the Steelers, they're not really coming out with if it's his ankle, which his agent specifically said the ankle's fine. But then we've heard some rumors that, the concussion is causing some other problems. And it's just, I don't know. I want to see the teams own this, and maybe the league is kind of putting the muzzle on that. But that kind of leads me into a little player I wanted to talk about, and that's Jesse James, the tight end that's going to be starting the first 6 weeks in theory here for the Steelers. I mean, he's 6'7", second-year player out of Penn State. I don't know if you've seen much of him, but he looked pretty good in this last preseason game with a touchdown. So, listeners, maybe keep your eye out on him. Friend of the podcast, Jeff Hopfer, he told me about him, and I put some YouTube film on, and he's a pretty big presence there. He might be a guy who eats some targets up in the red zone.
Well, we've got Ebron is going to be our second to last on the injury talk. He is 50-50 for week 1. Not a lot there. A lot of people don't even have Ebron. He's a breakout candidate, a guy that you can just basically keep your eye on if you're weak in tight end or in a real deep league. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think with the tight ends, though, the bigger news is Delaney Walker. We had a real good scare on him last week. Not last year. He had a really great last year. But last week, he went out with shortness of breath, and they really started to worry that he had some type of sickness, like a heart attack.
They were going to do blood work, and from the sounds of it, they were kind of concerned about something similar with what happened with like Eric Berry, some similar symptoms there, and he had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it seems like everything came back.
Everything I've read is that he's good. They're thinking maybe it was some like anxiety, which can mimic symptoms of a heart attack. When I saw the symptoms he had, I was thinking he had like a pulmonary embolism or something like that. Where
a what?
Yeah, a lung heart attack. But it's not good. I was really worried about him. I've got a few shares in Delaney Walker, and I mean, when I saw that, I was worried that he is going to miss significant time. You also worry about the player. I mean, it's not all about fantasy football, but you don't want to see a guy like Delaney who had a year like he did last year. People expect big things
over 90 receptions.
Yeah,
I think he led all tight end in catches.
So, and this year, I mean, he's a guy people expect a lot out of him. You don't want to see a guy like that miss a year of football. So it's real good news that everything supposedly right now is looking good. They said he should be back to practice Monday, be good to go. So that's good. We'll keep our ears to the ground on that. So as far as the news goes, that's going to be it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about the top performers from Week 3, and then a couple guys that just really busted. After that, we're going to talk some ramen. Talk to you in a few.
The estimated hold time is currently less than 96 minutes. You are currently caller number 32, waiting to speak with a representative. Thank you for your patience.
What the fuck was that?
And we're back. So we just talked about all the news.
Hey, let's give a quick shout-out real quick before we get into football, man. And now, it's not all about fantasy football. I want to give a shout-out to friend of the podcast, your wife, Brandy Seibel, for bringing us down a couple more cold beers.
I got the better one. I got Golden Light. You got Bud Light.
She listened last week and heard that you gave us the skunkiest Heinekens in the history of the world. Warm, skunky Heineken. So she brought us down a couple good ones. Michelob Golden Light, Bud Light. Life is good again.
So
I feel like I'm back now. Now I'm back to myself. The second half of the pod,
sticking what we know.
It's going to be exponentially better now than the first half of this pod.
Some people said last week was our best pod on the skunky Heineken. They said we were rolling so good.
I pod angry. Like, you know, I'm better at sex when I'm angry. I'm better at podcasting when I'm angry. I'm better at podcasting when I'm angry or drunk. Oh my God, it's just like my love life.
I'm just bad at podcasting in general, so beer just makes me feel better about it, I guess. So, all right. So now back to the fantasy football news. We caught up with basically the news, but now let's talk about who we saw last week that looked really, really good. Week 3, biggest week of preseason. You take away a lot from that. I'd say my top guys is going to be, I'll say my top guy is 2 guys because they're a team. It's the Mike Evans, Jameis Winston combo.
They looked fantastic. Mike Evans, 5 catches, 115 yards, and a SCO. He gone, and that was all in the first half. All from Jameis, who finished 16 for 25 for 259. So really going deep. 2 scores as well.
Listen, Evans, to me, man, he moved up as far as in my rankings because he looked undefendable. I haven't seen anybody in the preseason playing like him, and I was sad about Dez. I traded Dez, and Dez has been looking real good. Evans looked undefendable.
He does. He's in his 3rd year. It's a notorious year for receivers to break out. You know, and we've already seen him hit back-to-back years with 1,000 yards. We've seen him have double-digit touchdowns in his rookie season. So maybe this is the year he puts it all together and you really see what he's made of. And I like Mike Evans as well. I have 0 shares in him, unfortunately. I just offered up Jordy Nelson for him unsuccessfully. I was kind of bummed out about that. But I agree. I mean, those guys, they really stood out. We're not going to really do a huge recap of Week 3. We're a little bit late. It's Thursday already. We're plowing ahead towards the regular season. But I'll go to another team, and that was the Steelers. Just seeing their workhorses out there. Of course, Antonio Brown just looked unstoppable. Caught a touch.
Being Antonio Brown.
I know, just caught a touchdown on the first drive. Just eating up the defense.
I wish Antonio Brown had some drama news like Le'Veon and Ezekiel, because it's just boring saying the same thing about him every single week. Antonio Brown scoring touchdowns, getting lots of yards, catching passes.
Maybe he can kick more kickers.
That was my favorite Antonio Brown moment ever.
Yeah. I've been watching Ballers, and he makes a cameo on Ballers.
I gotta get caught up on that. That's something we gotta get caught up and talk about.
Yeah, I'm all the way caught up. It's actually a really good show on HBO. I like it a lot with The Rock and Rob Cadroy. He's really funny too. Le'Veon Bell, though, a guy.
Ringing the bell.
There it is, the Le'Veon Bell, folks. It was just nice, getting to talk about Le'Veon outside of the nonsense. I mean, he looked really good on the field. He lost a fumble. I think that was just kind of a one-off. I'm not going to look too much into that.
Outside of that.
5 receptions, though. I mean, we're the PPR Stock Report. That's all I care about. 5 catches, 37 yards in the first quarter.
Yeah, 3 for 21 isn't anything too crazy. I mean, it's still good, 7 average. But 5 catches, you got to like that. So it looks like we're going to see the Le'Veon that we know and love outside of suspensions and injury.
You have to feel kind of warm and fuzzy if you took him, say, 8th, 9th overall.
Some people are probably getting him in the 2nd round at a certain point during this offseason.
Yeah, so you're going to miss 3 games now because 1 game was docked. And he looked really good. So,
hey, as long as they don't do some weird stuff and you got to take Lilos as a handcuff, you still got to feel pretty good about this situation. So.
Well, I think Lilos could be a better handcuff for the next chunker we're going to talk about.
Oh, Cheeseburger Eddie, formerly known as Cheeseburger Eddie, but now known as
Turkey Burger Lacey.
Turkey Burger Lacey. Gosh, he looked good again, and I like it because I took a leap of faith on him. I was talking smack. I still drafted him just because I kind of had to with where he was. And it looks like he might be the Lacey that we expected him to be last year. I hope. He still looked a little big, though.
A friend of the pod, Adam Viscani, you follow him on Twitter, @Viscani, he sent me a still picture. He took a picture on the game, and it was Lacey, breaking a run and turning the corner, but he still looks big.
He looks a little thick, but hey, I look a little thick. I move good.
You do move good. 7 for 45, 7 carries, 45 yards. And, I like to see he busted a 21-yard run, too. So,
Last year, if he'd have ran 21 yards, he'd have been sounding like Darth Vader.
Oh, he would have been in that locker room with Delaney Walker, not catching his breath.
100% oxygen.
Yeah.
I love, and I say it all the time, but I love watching Lacey run. With his dreads and everything, he looks like Predator when he runs. I've said it plenty of times. I'll keep on saying it. That's Lacey, as long as he looks like Predator, I'm cool with it.
Another guy I noticed week 3 that stood out to me was Saints' number 2 receiver. And it's important you say that, number 2 receiver. I think a lot of people thought bringing in Michael Thomas that he automatically is going to be, the number 2 guy there. Willie Snead, 4 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown, all with Drew Brees in there. And this has kind of been a theme this preseason. He showed really well.
One of his touchdowns was a crazy touchdown. Some people say it was just focus because he jumped up with 3 guys around him. The ball got knocked away, and he came down, and it landed on his chest, and he still caught it. It was pretty wild. I think that was probably kind of lucky, just how the ball bounced. But at the end of the day, he still got the touchdown. He did have to have some focus, so we'll see what happens. I'm not convinced that he's going to be the quote-unquote number 2. I still think we're going to see a lot of what we talked about, Drew Brees spreading the ball around. So Willie Snead is a guy to keep your eye on. But he's also a guy you might start one week and get 21 points out of, and then start the next week and get 7.
He's going to be madly inconsistent. I agree with that. But, he showed well last year, over 900 yards in his rookie season. He's tearing it up this preseason, so get a little momentum for him. He's not a guy that I'm really targeting necessarily, but maybe on my watch list.
If he's there and you need somebody, just go ahead and grab him. Melvin Gordon is a guy that I want to see have a real consistent year. We didn't have that last year. A lot of high hopes for him. But so far in this preseason, he has looked pretty consistent. He's looked pretty good. What did we get out of him last week?
We got out of him something that we really didn't see all last season.
But we've seen twice already in 3 weeks.
Yes, and that was the home run. That was the dynamic, the dynamic event. And he had a 39-yard rush for a touchdown. He totaled 4 carries, 51 yards, and a touchdown. The previous week, he had a 44-yard receiving touchdown.
And it was nice.
Yeah, these large chunk gains. This is what we want to see out of him. He was drafted last year in the second round, and people really, really paid the price for that.
He's being talked about by his teammates in a way that he wasn't talked about last year. Rivers talking about how he's making these huge strides. He's turned into the running back that he's supposed to be. And you expect to get that from your quarterback. You didn't get a ton of it last year.
Well, I want to see how the Chargers staff handles Melvin Gordon this year compared to last.
You still got Danny Woodhead.
You still have Danny Woodhead, a very talented player. He's not going to be your guy between the tackles, obviously. He had over 80 receptions last year. Now, watching the Chargers, I'm a longtime Chargers fan. They're not a very good team. They were not a very good team last year. They were losing a lot in the fourth quarter. Danny Woodhead really did work, in the late parts of the game. And, almost, let's call them, kind of cheap ticky-tack catches while they're down.
So he's like a garbage time hero.
Obviously, if the Chargers are going to be competitive, that's not what they want. If the Chargers are going to be competitive, they want Melvin Gordon, eating these yards up. They want Melvin Gordon on the field.
So it needs to be the Melvin Gordon, Keenan Allen show.
Yeah,
basically.
Well, and the other thing is, it kind of drove me crazy. And look, I have shares in Danny Woodhead. He is one of my favorite players to watch. When he gets the ball, he's really exciting. But in the fourth quarter, the red zone on third down, the Chargers always go to Danny Woodhead. And it's like, let this guy Gordon now. He has a year under his belt. Let's see him in some of these pressure situations and see what he can do with them. I'd really like to see that with the Chargers moving forward.
I need Woodhead to do better, so Chargers, don't listen to Dak So Dreamy over here. All right, so guys that didn't impress and are basically looking consistently not good we're going to start with Forsett.
My fantasy football team namesake from last year, Justin Forsett.
Forsett in my mouth?
Forsett in her mouth.
In her mouth, not my mouth.
Ba-da-ding.
Forsett, 2 carries for 0 yards.
Yeah.
So Forsett is a guy that we just keep expecting them to turn to. The Ravens had him last year. He was their bell cow till he broke his arm. He just has not come forward like we expect him to. You almost just have him as the number one automatically, but that whole backfield is such a mess that it's really not even worth touching.
And it's not only how bad he's looked or how pedestrian he's looked. We're seeing chunk gains out of Terrence West. We've heard in camp that he's looking really good. Before Kenneth Dixon went down, we kind of missed him on injury. He went down as well. He ran for 7 carries for 45 yards, I believe. And then in week 2 of the preseason, we saw Buck Allen come out and look really good. And
the only guy we haven't seen look good is Forsett.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something else going on there that we just don't know about.
Oh, look at this next guy you have written down here for underperformers.
He hasn't been consistently underperforming. He did have we're talking Danny Woodhead. We just mentioned him. He ran 3 times for 0 yards.
What a great name, Danny Woodhead.
It is pretty good. 1 for 25 on the receptions.
That's where he's going to do the damage, yeah.
But if you have Danny Woodhead starting, that's still only 4 points. That's not what you want. And I know he didn't play the whole game.
Limited time.
But
hey, nobody likes 3 carries, 0 yards. We had to put somebody on here.
We did. But the guy that needs to be at the top of this list? Ajayi. Holy crap, has anybody been as bad as him?
My boy.
Your boy, Ajayi. You see how I censor myself? I've got way better podcast etiquette than you. We wouldn't be explicit if it was just me.
You're right. We would definitely we wouldn't be explicit and we wouldn't be listened to.
You wouldn't be saying holy crap. But anyways, Ajayi, man, there was talk about him being the guy. I bet the Dolphins are so happy they brought Foster in right now because Ajayi just has not looked like he can do it. He doesn't look like he can run in the NFL. He was 7 carries for 11 yards.
we talk about this, and I didn't really see anything out of a J.I. last year. I even went to his college film, and I didn't even love what I saw in his highlight reel. College film being me clicking on YouTube. But no, I'm not crazy about a J.I. I'd love to be wrong. Foster did, plunge in the end zone for a 2-yard touchdown. He's not running gangbusters either, but he's catching the ball efficiently. I think he's going to be the starter. I mean, I think it's going to be, a 60-40 at best case scenario for a J.I. as far as the split goes there.
Maybe at the beginning, but eventually, at some point, it's just going to be Foster. Until Foster gets hurt, and then it's going to have to be a J.I.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe Carlos Williams.
Yeah, Lilos is going to be there. Hey, you know what? Lilos would be a good fit because 4 games is about what you got to expect out of Foster before he goes down with some kind of injury.
That sounds about right. Now, let's go into, kind of something we've been doing for the last few years. It's really fun. Trent and I, every week, we do our ramen rosters, and we battle against each other. The namesakes come from poor college kids eating ramen noodles, eating on a budget.
Eating on a budget.
Yeah, so, when you're digging deep, you're scouring the waiver wire, maybe you're filling in for an injury, or you have a bye week situation, and you're looking at the waiver wire. We call that our Ramen Roster.
Yeah, so basically the way it works, and we want people to actually be involved with us this year. Last year we did it every single week. We looked at everybody based on Yahoo's rankings and whatnot. We looked at everybody who's owned. Last year was owned in less than 70%, but when we really thought about it, competitive leagues, anybody that's owned in 70% of leagues, they're probably taken. So this year we're going to do 60%. So we're basically going to look at everybody who's owned in less than 60% of leagues in Yahoo, and we're going to put a whole team together based on that, and we compete with each other every week. And this year, we want you guys to actually compete with us. Throw some ramen rosters, teams together. And
we'll start advertising it on Twitter. And this isn't necessarily our ramen roster for week 1. We'll have that possibly leading up to week 1.
Yeah, that's going to be coming next week.
This might be our ramen waiver wire, or if you haven't drafted,
this will be the ramen preview.
Yeah,
we basically right now we think most people have probably drafted. But there are still some values out there on the waiver wire right now. So we looked at guys that would qualify for our ramen roster, a couple guys from each position, and we're going to let you guys know what that is so that you guys can take a look. If they're there, they're worth grabbing, especially right now if you got some dumb kicker on your team or whatever. Just see how these guys are looking.
We have 2 quarterbacks written down here. Trent, why don't you cover the quarterbacks that we have? And again, these guys are owned in less than 60% of Yahoo Fantasy Leagues.
Well, why don't you, Mr. Dak So Dreamy, cover the first quarterback?
Dak So Dreamy. Yeah. I mean, listen, if you're streaming quarterbacks, why not take a flyer on Dak? If you own Dez, I mean, I'm comfortable in that. It looks like he can scramble, make some plays with his legs. We saw it last year with Tyrod.
And he's playing behind the best line in football.
I know Tyrod wasn't a rookie last year, so he wasn't as green, but he didn't have much NFL experience, so I really like Dak. He has a very low ownership, and then the second quarterback here is Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Jets.
So he kind of has a reason that he hasn't been picked. He hasn't looked that good so far.
No, he hasn't.
But you have to remember he missed a lot of time because he had all that contract talk. He wasn't practicing. He wasn't out there doing the deal. And he's still kind of catching up. But do you have any doubts that he will get caught up and you're going to see similar numbers out of him from what we saw last year?
No, I don't have any doubts at all. I'm not sure he's going to ascend past what he did last year, but I think that's a nice baseline for what to expect this year. I mean, just the weapons he has with Brandon Marshall and Decker, I mean, that's one of the better 1-2 combos in the league. Both of those guys are consistent 1,000-yard performers, double-digit touchdowns as well. So, again, if you suffer an injury, maybe if you were drafting in a deeper league, you had Romo, maybe even Teddy Bridgewater in like a 2-quarterback league, these are guys to really keep your eye out for.
Listen, just to piggyback on Dak, if you're taking a flyer on him, he starts the season against the Giants, who give up a ton of points.
They spent some money on their defense, but yeah, I mean, they notoriously let up a lot of yards, a lot of points.
Then they got the Redskins, then
the
Bears.
Defense. Bears are garbage.
And then they got the 49ers.
49ers, wet garbage.
So they got the Bengals after that, which is pretty decent, the Packers. But the first 4 weeks of the season, Dak shouldn't have too tough of a time scoring some points. Running backs, who are our ramen running backs?
Three names we're going to use for Ramen running backs, again, owned in under 60% of leagues. We have Charles Sims from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
So we talk about PPR here, and Charles Sims is a PPR prospect for us. He ran for 4 for 13, nothing too crazy there, but 3 for 16 and a touchdown. So he's getting those touchdown passes. He's seeing some work in the red zone.
Yeah, and he's a guy that you don't necessarily need to only look at as a handcuff. I mean, I think, deep on the bench, he has standalone value for, flex plays or, running back 2 bye week fill-in. So, yeah, Charles Sims, he's going to be a guy kind of built in the mold of, the Theo Riddick or the Danny Woodhead. He's going to do most of his damage on the receiving end, but he's wildly efficient.
Tell me about this Spencer Ware character.
Spencer Ware, he is still, believe it or not, owned in under 60% of Yahoo leagues. I expect that possibly to change before the season actually starts. So when we're putting our rosters out, we might not see this name. But if, when we're going to publish this evening, look and see if Spencer Ware is out on your waiver wire.
Especially with the news that Jamal might not be playing in week 1. So
and not only that, if Jamal is playing, it seems like Spencer Ware has a role regardless. And remember, Jamal Charles will be 30 years old in December, and he has 2 blown out ACLs.
Well, so what do you think? Spencer Ware, Sharkhandrick's out there too, but we just haven't seen anything out of Sharkhandrick. So Spencer Ware is going to be your guy. He had 4 for 26 last year on the receptions. He also ran 9 for 24 and a touchdown. So he is, what did we call it last week? The dual threat. Or that's what we can't say, right?
Yeah, we can't say that. Apparently that's racist. But I think that only applies to quarterbacks of color. I think a running back you can call the dual threat.
All right, well, Spencer Ware is a dual threat. So, Crowell, that's our third guy.
Yeah, last guy to mention here is he's actually a starting running back.
And he looked like he's been running pretty hard. When you really get deep, these guys that are less than 60% owned, you don't see a lot of starting running backs. Crowell is a starting running back. He is running pretty good. He's running hard, he's always kind of run hard, but it's been such a mess. But it looks like this year he's going to be the guy. He was 8 for 39 last week. So, he's looking pretty good, and I'm surprised that he's out there just not on a team. Basically, people aren't taking flyers on him. So
yeah, he's the starting guy. Duke Johnson. We just talked about Charles Sims. It looks like he's going to have more of a role like that. Isaiah Crowell. We actually saw some spurts of a pretty good player in his rookie year. Not as much last year, but now Terrence West is gone. It was a little bit of a crowded backfield. So I'm interested to see what we have in this guy.
And look, we kind of mentioned it before, but we've had a bunch of running backs go down. And, we've had a lot of wide receivers, but you're seeing some of these running backs go down, Matt Jones, stuff like that. And with people taking wide receivers early, if you waited on some of these running backs and then all of a sudden one of your guys go down, Crowell's a guy that might be able to fit the mold and kind of plug the leak right there before it gets too bad. Wide receivers, this is where most of our PPR guys just it's our bread and butter.
I'm very surprised about this first guy.
Oh, yeah. Funchess is
Defunch,
60% owned still. So people aren't looking at the news because Kelvin Benjamin is owned in almost every single league.
Yeah, he's over 90% owned.
But Funchess is, for all intents and purposes, arguably the number 1 guy.
He's kind of outperforming him, and we haven't seen Benjamin in over a year.
Look, he's not kind of outperforming him. He's getting more catches, more yards, and he's getting more targets. The targets is the big thing to me.
So he's outperforming him.
He is for sure outperforming Benjamin. And Benjamin might come around, but right now Funchess looks like he's going to possibly be the wide receiver 1, and even if he's not, there's no way that he's not going to be a big part of that game plan. So 60% owned. Look and see if he's there. If he's there, he's worth grabbing and dropping some garbage player on your team like Sammy Coates or something like that,
At this point, I think I would take Funchess over Sammy Coates.
I think last week Sammy Coates was really bad. He had an all-right game this week. So we'll see what happens with him. But, yeah, Funchess, he's a guy that's going to put up PPR league points regardless. He shouldn't be on any waiver wires right now. Will Fuller, Houston wide receiver, he is their number 2. He's a guy that a lot of people don't even know about, and he's looking real good over there also.
Yeah, it looks like he's beating out Jalen Strong for the number 2 spot.
Which Jalen Strong is getting picked a lot in the towards the end of the drafts.
Brock Osweiler had some good things to say about Fuller, that he's a complete player. He's had a really good preseason this past weekend. He had 3 receptions for 67 yards, another touchdown. He's a guy with very low ownership. Again, if you're in a deeper league or you need to take just want to flyer on a guy, especially if you're a DeAndre owner, I mean, you could handcuff your receiver. For instance, I carry Mohamed Sanu in the leagues that I have Julio Jones, just because I know on those teams, the number 1 receiver sees a ton of target shares. It's very similar down there in Houston. The number 1 receiver is going to see a ton of targets regardless of who it is.
But even if, on these types of situations, DeAndre is still rolling, you got Will Fuller, he still probably is going to have some good flex value for you, especially depending on who you're going against, what defense is. So, I mean, it's a good streamer to have.
Tajay Sharp, our third and final one, he's a guy I've picked up in all my leagues.
So, according to the notes, he's going to be our third and final. But we got one more for you after that also. So, Tajay Sharp.
So, wait, he's our third and not final.
Yes, sir. Third and not final. I just don't know how to write stuff in order because we forgot about.
Oh, yeah, look at that little name. Okay, well, let's roll with.
You just jogged my memory.
Tajay Sharp out of UMass. He's a rookie. Wildly productive receiver in college, 111 receptions last year.
So DGB just left and kind of opened the door for Tajay to step in and kind of take the reins there for the old DGB role. And he's grasping it. He's running with it.
He looks really good. He's playing as the number 1 receiver in 1 receiver sets and, like heavy run packages. And another thing happened. Not only did DGB get traded out, Kendall Wright has been banged up. And Rashard Matthews is kind of the other receiver there vying for, let's say, the number 1 duties. They've actually, and I said duties, and lowbrow here on the PPR Stock Report, they've moved Rashard Matthews into the slot, and they've continued to let Sharp operate as number 1 receiver. So he's a guy, I mean, it's a running offense. They want to run DeMarco and Derrick Henry into the ground. But I wouldn't be surprised here, Trent. We saw with Kendall Wright a couple of years ago at Tennessee.
70 catches, 80 catches.
I could see him in between that 70 and 80, 800 yards, 900 yards, somewhere right around there.
So, yeah, I could see him getting the catches, but he's a playmaker also. He had a few targets. I think he had 4 targets this week, but he caught one long 60-yard bomb that looked real nice. And he looks like he can do that hopefully consistently. So if he's a guy that's going to catch 60, 70 passes, but also break some long touchdowns, really put the yards, he's a guy who nobody really knows who he is. You can grab for nothing right now. Real good value. The other guy we were going to talk about, DeAndre Washington out of Oakland. He is another sneaky pick. He's been looking real good. And we talked about him earlier on the pod. He's not the DeAndre.
Not the DeAndre. DeAndre Washington, Oakland running back. I can't believe that this guy's owned in less than 60% of leagues. I don't know. I guess I can believe it when I'm seeing that Spencer Ware's not, Isaiah Crowell, Funchess. But, I mean, Latavius Murray is owned in 100% of leagues. If you have Latavius Murray and you haven't caught on to DeAndre Washington yet, you're out of your goddamn mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say other than DeAndre Washington. He's been looking good. If you got Murray, grab Washington. He's a good handcuff. That when Murray goes down, if he goes down, he's not like super injury prone, but if he goes down, DeAndre's Washington, not just DeAndre. I can't do that.
No,
he's
you
not
can't.
The DeAndre.
No.
D-Wash. Yeah.
D-Wash. We are, God, we're not creative.
Yeah, I suck at this. DeAndre Washington, he's going to come in, and I think he's going to produce in Oakland.
How about D-Wizzle?
D-Wizzle?
I guess it'd be D'Angelo Williams. Damn it.
Yeah, no. So, we'll think of something by next week because we'll probably be talking about DeAndre Washington again next week. The last one we're going to talk about, tight end. I guess at this point we can call him, you can say he's my boy, which would be ya boy.
Virgil Green.
Virgil Green, man.
Denver Broncos, Virgil Green. That is your guy. You've picked him up in all leagues you're in.
I'm not even a Broncos fan, but now that the Rams are gone, maybe I just should be because I really like Demarius.
Oh, you have the hardest hard-on in the world for Demarius.
And Virgil Green's looked real good too, so I think Virgil Green is a guy that nobody's picking up, and he has looked really good in the preseason. He looks like he's got a lot of chemistry going on with Seaman up there. Simeon. I think Virgil Green's a guy that if you're hard up for a tight end, which I am in a couple leagues because I didn't pick tight ends and I didn't pick quarterbacks. I really got the wide
both
receivers
deep
and running
pools
backs.
of players in both of those positions.
Yeah, and and this is like...
I mean, even Charles Clay at tight end is like 20% owned, so the tight end pool is pretty deep.
So, yeah, Virgil Green, he's a guy, if he's out there, he's worth rostering as well. So that's going to do it for us on the September 1st version of the PPR Stock Report. Next time we catch you, next week, we're going to be rolling right into the real NFL season.
Can we slap 5 for that?
Yeah, real loud. Oh, that was a nice one.
That was meaty.
All right, guys, we'll catch you next week. Make sure that you check out our website, pprstockreport.com. Hit us up on Twitter. That's PPR_StatGrinder and at DAC_so_dreamy. And make sure to subscribe on iTunes. Till next week.
Have a safe holiday weekend, y'all.
Peace.